Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Radio Little Lotus. My name is Peter and I will be your host for tonight. Signore e signori, benvenuti a Radio Little Lotus. Io sono Peter e sarò il vostro presentatore stasera. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome finally to the first episode of my little podcast. Okay, so I'm running a little bit behind, and obviously I am, how can I put this, a little bit nervous about this. So if you are here, by all means say hi. The chat does work as far as I know, and I hope that there are a few of you out there listening. If you are listening, by all means, please share the link. Anyway, okay, why are we here? Why the creation of this radio, and why this particular subject tonight? The radio in itself, like I've said already in the intros, for those of you who have actually listened to them, it's more to do with my personal journey, with what I have been through, and with what I wish to share with everybody out there as well. What I get out of it, obviously, is quite simply more learning. And that is all of what I get out of it. What I share are the teachings which I have received in the last maybe 35 years of my shall we say conscious spiritual journey, and amongst them, those thoughts, amongst those observations which I've come to with time, it's where I actually find myself looking at tonight's question, and tonight's question is spiritualism and modern day society. Can it actually survive? Well, that is actually quite a big question as far as I'm concerned, in the sense that, to be perfectly honest, if I was to look at it objectively as we do now, or as we should do, how can I put this? Spirituality in itself, in its purest of forms maybe, it's kind of on the rise, but at the same time in decline, in the sense that up until now the greatest spiritual teachings have actually come from the kind of person who is basically dying out as a dynasty. What I mean is, okay, let's start from where I actually thought of this and where I am actually coming from. When I first started this journey, I found my greatest insights from people who were no longer here. As in, for obviously I did a lot of research and I did a lot of questioning sort of thing, and I found myself asking particular questions. Those questions were eventually answered only by a certain kind of person. Those people were monks, but I'm not talking about the priest that most of us know, or the monk that most of us would know. I'm talking about some highly devoted people, people who are totally devoted to the essence, to being in the moment and to being exactly who they are. And in order to be this, or in order to attain this, basically, I think that what they have had to do, or what they've done, is they've gone through a variety of changes, basically, which are consequential one to another, and I believe that as time moves on, uh, that role is also kind of dying out, which to me personally, being quite a, should we say, orthodox spiritualist in the sense that I see spirituality in a very, very straight manner, should we say. Um, I think that it's very important that certain traditions should carry on. And I'm not talking, I mean, those of you who know me know that I follow a Buddhist tradition. Yes, that is so, and yes, the Buddhist traditions are part of the ones which are dying out. You only need to look at the fact that they've actually extended outside of their own place of birth, if you like, within these creed, within this, how can I put this, within this method of teaching, that to see just how cautious they're being and how much they themselves do not wish for this tradition, for these teachings to be lost. Exactly. So if we look at the different traditions, and I'm obviously including mostly Asian traditions, but I'm not talking about just Asian traditions because it would be unfair to do so. There are other traditions which are being lost as well. If we look at the different tribes from different parts of the globe, from Australia to New Zealand, okay, there we're still in that kind of zone, but we only need to go across the oceans into America to see that the natives are also losing those traditions. We are looking at all over the world, basically, and we can see that those traditions are being heavily influenced by today's lifestyles. And this is a problem. It's a problem because of the fact that the young who were once maybe taught differently from what we are teaching today, that kind of person who is looking for that kind of deep, meaningful contact with themselves, with their spirituality, it's kind of dying out. And to me personally, I think it's basically a crying shame. There are so many traditions which people are not aware of. When we are talking about, obviously, the American Indian, we are talking about many shamanic traditions, but not just the shamanic traditions. It's their way of life, their way, traditions which have gone lost with time due to progress. Traditions which, by the way, are based in time. They're based, those traditions in themselves are not based just in, they're not just based in something which has been repeated just for the sake of being repeated. They have been repeated because of the fact that they work. They are a part of their lives and a part of the way that they grew up. And this is not, obviously, as I'm talking, I'm actually realizing myself that I'm not just talking about tribal people. I'm not just talking about general people who are away from contact from society, if we like. I'm talking about pretty much every kind of person, every kind of being that has had a deep connection, not just to themselves, but to the world in itself and to life, and therefore the planet in itself. Now, at the moment, we are going through quite something. COVID-19 has hit everybody, and I mean everywhere. And it has kind of forced a lot of us to make a lot of changes. I myself have found myself not so much making changes, but going back to something which I felt was important. And talking about this kind of subject is actually extremely important. Um, there are many traditions, and I'm not talking about. You see, when we're talking about tribes, people get confused. There are little traditions which come from little islands. For those of you who know me, know that I've actually lived in Italy for more than half my life, and there's a little island there. I say little; it's actually one of their largest ones, called Sardinia. And for those of you who have never been there, the land itself, it is the most fantastic energy you could ever imagine. If you get a chance, by all means, go there. Please respect the local people. Please respect their traditions because of the fact that they have a lot to teach the world. And I've actually lived there for a few months myself, a few years back, and I can only say they are the most beautiful people to know. They are the most traditional of people, maybe still left in Italy, even though they will tell you they're not actually Italians. Simply because of the fact that being an island apart, and those of you who come from England, sort of thing, can probably kind of relate to this. You kind of distantiate yourself from the main continent. Now, we as British do it with the continent, as in for the European continent, even though we are still very much a part of it, and the Sardinians do it in very much the same way by distancing themselves from the main continent. By the main continent, they actually mean the main peninsula, which is Italy. But moving on, there are so many of these beautiful little traditions which are kind of lost in time, kind of lost in they're going missing. And how can I put this to you? It is just the greatest shame as far as I'm concerned. And I would encourage any of you who have the possibility, to have the chance to go out and learn any of these traditions, by all means, please, please do. And if you get the chance, please share them with others. Now, going back to the spirituality subject, what I've just said is actually quite spiritual as well. If you are quite conscious of your spirituality, your whole life is spiritual, and therefore everything that affects it is spiritual. Now, I look at things when as I've grown up, as I've gone through history, as I've researched the subject, and I find that so many traditions have actually become really, really popular, yet the true meaning, the true essence of it, it's kind of left aside, as in for, and please do not misunderstand if you are a practitioner of yoga these days and you do practice here on the continent or here in the European zones, shall we say, or away from its original cultures. But the yoga that we know over here, the yoga which is practiced over here, it's only the beginning. It's only a little part of what somebody who would follow a path like yoga would actually undertake. The true name for those who actually follow the tradition, I believe, is that of a yogi. And again, of the many, many, many people that I know, I actually know about 4 or 5 yogis myself, and four of those are actually quite old people now. And coming from me, that's saying something. But jokes apart, there is only one other person who is actually still studying to become a full yogi, and that is a very, very dear friend of mine and a spiritual brother to me, Stefano. Um, he is the only person I know who has actually taken and undertaken every vow that there is within yoga. And that, to me, kind of, like I said to you earlier, I'm kind of a traditionalist, and therefore, to me, that is actually pretty much the only person who is actually following that tradition properly. Um, do not misunderstand me. Again, if you are following the tradition and the different guidelines and the different rules, and I'm pretty sure that there are some of you who do follow traditional yogis as well, but as a whole, the tradition has lost an awful lot. Not only that, when we are talking about going into retreat, which is something that a yogi does on a regular basis, the same way as what many monks, many shamans do, then we are looking at a big part of that tradition which is missing, simply because of the fact that those beings who are traditionally trained would normally go off for quite a lengthy time and do meditation basically. And during that time they would have the opportunity and the chance to actually, how can I put this, to actually better understand themselves and to better understand the teachings that they have received so far. Now, any discipline which can be truly classified as spiritual, and again, this is my personal point of view. I don't expect everybody to have the same point of view. As a matter of fact, I welcome any feedback, any opposing thought, simply because of the fact that I believe that it is extremely important for you to be able to go against anything which I say. Like I said quite often, and I've always believed this, if I tell you something, I never expect you to actually believe me. What do I mean by this? I actually mean that I expect you to go out there and find out for yourself as to whether what I'm saying is actually true to life, as to whether what I'm saying is what actually should be, what actually is. Now, this means simply that I can give you knowledge. I can bring knowledge onto this podcast, onto this radio show, whatever you want to call it, and I can ensure that the people who come before you, the people who you are listening to, are going to be competent within their field, which means that you will be able to put them to the test if you wish to do so, and that I shall be putting them to the test as well. If you have questions which you are weary about asking them, you are more than welcome to contact me privately through one of my Facebook profiles, especially the Peter Dharma Walker, or through one of the pages, be it the consultations page, be it the Radio Little Lotus page, or be it my website, and the website address is www.peterdharmawalker.info. Okay, so, like I said, if you are weary about asking any question to anybody or would like a subject put out there, by all means contact me, and we will bring it onto the onto this podcast at some stage or another. What I was saying is this. the importance of these traditions, it's such that without them there will be a bigger problem or bigger difficulties in actually achieving what it is in your spiritual journey is there to do, and that is to totally reconnect you, to reawaken or enlighten you along the way. Now, if this is what you're after, if this is what you seek, now in the future, those traditions are usually at least a starting base for most of us. Personally speaking, I've actually been through a lot of different traditions. I have pursued many different paths until I actually found one which was the right one for me. And even though I think that my path is a pretty good one, I don't think that it is for everybody, and that is why bringing different opinions, different people into the equation actually amplifies that for me, and it amplifies and gives you a more accurate perspective as to what can be or can't be. So, like I was saying, if we're talking about traditional yogis, we are talking about, like I was a second ago, then the traditions which are followed now, or should we say the practice which is done now, by people who are obviously wanting to or needing to pursue their spirituality in one way or another, and they have found this system which actually works for them, and I'm actually really glad for you that you found something that works for you. I will add that you will probably also be aware, and especially I would say that most teachers will be aware of the fact that unfortunately you are not able to follow a full path in the same way as what a traditional yogi would be. The same thing is actually true for most monks. Now, this is a subject which maybe I can talk a little bit more in depth about, simply because of the fact that I know a little bit more or a lot more monks than what I do yogis. Now, traditional monks are do not misunderstand me, obviously. A traditional monk would obviously normally be from the land itself where that particular creed or that particular tradition was born from, and would obviously diverge from there, simply because of the fact that obviously growing within that within the nurture of that creed system, be it a religion, be it a theology, be it whatever it might be, they would be able to fully follow their path. Okay, whilst by living life as we do, organizing 100 different things, it is actually very, very hard to do. Now, I'm going to make a personal example simply because the fact that obviously I don't want to go and cover inconvenience anybody else's experience. But I find this now, and you know, anybody who is a holistic teacher or holistic practitioner, if you don't know what that is, let's just say for most other people who don't know what that is, you would probably call it a new age kind of thing. It actually quite isn't, but that's okay. We'll forgive you now, in the sense that you are here to learn that as well. Now, a holistic teacher is a holistic practitioner is somebody who looks at unwellness within a person from every possible aspect. The word itself, which is holistic actually comes from the word holos, and holos is a Greek word which actually means complete, complete 360, but looking at it as in for a globe, as in for, so obviously looking at from every angle which is possible. Now, like I said, one of the difficulties that we find is this, and it's quite simply put, okay, traditionally a monk would normally go into a monastery or a temple, and they would undertake their vows, they would spend some time there, and then it would be part of their tradition. And obviously, as long as they are within the walls, they are quite covered in the sense that, their basic needs, food, shelter, water, they're covered. And that is pretty much all of what any of us really need. Which means then they have had plenty of time to dedicate to meditation, to prayer, to the different disciplines that they might have chosen, as well as their given vocation. And obviously, given vocations are varied. For myself, is that of teaching, and therefore, my vocation, therefore, is to go out there and teach. Obviously, this just being another of those tools that I will use in order to do so. And so if we are looking at it from that kind of point of view, so if we're looking at it from a whole, when we're talking about a traditional monk or a traditional priest or whatever he might be, who is allowed to grow within that ambient, within that kind of protection, within that shelter, if we like, and then is obviously or will eventually take part in maintaining or sustaining that, therefore will go out and seek for food, seek for whatever it is and the temple might need, basically. The way that it would work, sort of thing, it was basically, the monk would go out, they would receive an offering from somebody, and they, in exchange, would perform whatever that person is in need of. Okay. If you look at that in modern terms, and from our point of view, as in for somebody who is not part of a monastery, somebody who is not part of that enclosure, but is obliged basically by life in itself to go out and what they say, earn a living. I say that very sarcastically, as you might have noticed by my tone of voice, simply because of the fact that I kind of resent the term. It's not earning a living, it is simply going out to do what is necessary in order for you to survive. And in order for you to survive in these days, you actually need quite a lot. Now, because of the fact that unlike traditionalist monks, we are unable to live within the temple. We have things like rent to pay, and we have bills to pay, and we have all these expenses which obviously, come to something. And if we were to try and pursue our lives in the same manner as what a monk would, we would obviously need to do something to survive. And if we were to follow our true path, our true calling, that calling would be to do something like being a holistic operator. Now, the difference between the two is quite simply this. One has necessities of survival, the other one has the same necessities, but within a different kind of perspective. And what I mean by this is quite simply this. when you look at the monk, you have somebody who, when he goes out, is traditionally respected. The people that he sees in his daily life, in his daily doings, even, and this is true also for traveling monks, which are the ones who actually go a greater distance. They would normally be the guest of a house, and they would do whatever that household required in order to basically earn their keep. Which is basically, what we're talking about. It's earning your keep. But earning your keep, as I said, if you're looking at it as in for a holistic operator or somebody who works within the field of spirituality, then we have to obviously abide by the rules of this society, not of a society which is acceptant, which actually supports and gives time and space for you to develop in. The way it actually works for people who don't go to a temple, it's actually a little bit harsher in the sense that, you are basically, as soon as you are able to, as soon as you feel that calling, you are pretty much obliged into exchanging your energy, so earning your living as a holistic operator or as some kind of a practitioner. And in doing so, you kind of, put it, we don't have the same instigation in us, as in for, we haven't quite always done the full cycle of what needs to be done in order for that theory that we've learned to be full practice. Now, I've been observing quite a lot, and I've been thinking about different things, and I've also been reading a book recently which has been of great interest. And one of the things that these things have actually brought to me is to observe. And if you observe the way that we perceive things, the way that we see things, is usually quite different from the way that we actually feel about them. Now, one of the things that the book actually brought to mind is quite simply how long something that is used as a modern term, but it's not quite in the same way as what it used to be, what an apprenticeship is. An apprenticeship is a time period where you have enough time to practice a craft. Now, this craft can be obviously anything. And if you're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, we are probably talking about, obviously hours of meditation, hours of practice. And if you are looking at a true apprenticeship, you're probably looking at about between 5, calculating man hours, working weeks, and so on and so forth. If you calculate, the average person who goes out to work, working for 8 hours a day, if they're lucky, therefore doing a 5-day week, again if they're lucky, so the 40 hours a week, which throughout the year are this many, at the end of between 5 and 7 years, they will have actually done about 10,000 hours worth of experience. Now, 10,000, it's actually something that brought back to mind one of the teachings which I had received, which is one of the things which I was actually reflecting upon. When I first started to meditate with the use of mantras and mudras, obviously I was quite curious to know as to how long it more or less takes to actually get there. And the answer that was given, it's pretty much the same. You know, by the time when you actually say a mantra once, you kind of feel awkward about it. You don't really know. Sometimes it just feels right, sort of thing. So you just keep saying it, and so you repeat it, say 10 times, 100 times, and by the time you've actually repeated 100 times, it's not in you, but it's you kind of get a feeling of what it's about, yeah, or at least you think you have a perception of what it's about, and you carry on going until you get to that 1,000. And when you get to 1,000, then that mantra, that mudra that you're using, it's pretty much a part of your energy, of your being. Okay. If you want to know when you actually master it, when you actually become totally independent, and you actually no longer need to practice, this is it. There is a difference between saying a mantra in one way or another, in the sense that if I repeat a mantra to practice the mantra, it is one thing. I have no direction for the mantra to go in except for my practice. If I am saying mantras, for example, as some of you know, I am a Medicine Buddha practitioner. If I am repeating the Medicine Buddha mantra, then I am doing so for somebody else, basically, or for myself. So it has an intent to it. Why? Because of the fact that having repeated the mantra 10,000 times, that mantra is now totally a part of me. I have no need to practice it anymore. I simply use it when it is necessary to do so. This doesn't mean that it is not part of my practice. Okay, it has been part of my practice for many years, and I will continue to practice this mantra. And the same is true of many other mantras. So basically, what I'm saying to you is that if you do practice, or you are practicing something, it does actually take time, it takes dedication, it takes effort. Also because of the fact that, sometimes when you go through the different stages of this apprenticeship, you go through a lot of different emotions, and it's actually very, very good for you in the sense that it actually gets to show you exactly what you're made of sometimes. Sometimes you've got to push through. Sometimes it's really, really easy. Sometimes it's absolutely amazing. And sometimes it can be the hardest thing that you have to do. But if you are to be true to your word, if you are true to your practice and to your faith, as in and by faith I don't mean a faith in a God or a religion or a creed or whatever. It is the faith that you have placed in whatever you are practicing. Okay? If you are true to your faith and therefore to yourself, then you have the opportunity to go deep within yourself and actually see yourself for who you truly are. Now, as I started to say earlier, this COVID, this virus, this pandemic, has actually given me a chance to go back within myself, something that I hadn't had time really to do in the last couple of 3 years, simply because of the fact that I've been involved in other projects. Now, I have no how can I put this? I say no issues. I have no qualm with doing an outside job from what is my vocation within the spiritualist, or within spiritualism, or within my practices. And I'm actually really glad that I have done this, the jobs that I have done, and I'm actually really, really happy than I've had, the experiences that I've had, I've met some fantastic, absolutely fantastic people along the way. And believe it or not, in the middle of nowhere, in the last place that you would expect to meet somebody who could really and truly answer questions for you, like a bodhisattva. I found one of those in the middle of a hostel, in the middle of nowhere, in the last place that I imagined in Italy. The and he's, if he is listening to us, and I'm hoping that he is, and then he does, I'd like to thank him. I'd like to thank him. I won't say his name because he is an extremely private person, and he does really care for his privacy. So I won't say his name unless he actually tells me I can at some stage or another. But if I put it. If I had to be grateful for one thing alone in the last 3 years, that would be probably it, was the meeting with this particular guy. There was also a further meeting with another guy who was also who is a bodhisattva, although he is what I like to call an unconscious bodhisattva. Now, for those of you who don't know what a bodhisattva is, like I said earlier, a bodhisattva is somebody who is on their way to being enlightened. The difference between a conscious and an unconscious bodhisattva is, and one is obviously aware of the fact that he is on his way, the other one is not. In fact, the other one who is not actually aware of any spiritual or spirituality at all. What he does, according to himself and to his beliefs and his life, is actually purely out of the goodness and greatness of his own being, of his own heart, which is even more beautiful than to watch than a conscious bodhisattva. Even having said that, these two guys have really opened my eyes out to a lot of different things, and kind of brought me back to my original belief in the first place, especially for what regards my own path, sort of thing. So, like I said, I've been away from the teaching in a spiritual sense for the last 3 years, a couple of 3 years, and this doesn't actually mean that I've actually stopped learning or that I've actually stopped improving on what I have been doing. As a matter of fact, well, you will find out for yourselves, especially those of you who actually know me. They'll find out exactly the kind of person that's coming out of this. So, like I said, COVID for me, I could almost say has been a friend, in the sense that it has given me the occasion of going back into myself and actually realizing that 3 years ago I was actually working with another radio station, and in Italy actually, and I did a lot of work there. I was there as a host, I was there as on the technical side of it as well, and it actually gave me a chance to learn exactly what I'm doing now, for which I'm actually very grateful. I'm also grateful to this person for the knowledge that she's imparted in me as far as marketing is concerned. Now, of course, everybody's going to go, oh no, that's a horrible word, marketing. But guess what, people? In order for me to get this this radio out there, in order for me to be able to reach more people, marketing and research is exactly what goes into it. It's finding the right people, it's finding the right subjects, and making sure that everything that we do, or that I do, is of the best possible quality in the in the delivery sense, but also as far as the people, the subjects, and the way that we actually look at different things. So going back to what I was saying, or the subject of this evening, what is paramount, or what is really, really important, is the fact that these traditions, as they get lost, as the people who normally would contribute to these traditions and who have a deeper innate understanding of certain traditions, as these perspectives in lives, as these teachings, as these traditions are lost, the world will suffer, guys, and the world is suffering enough as it is. Just look at what's happening now from a different perspective, and I don't know about you guys. I find few and fewer positive posts. I find fewer and fewer people being tolerant. All you have to do is just look around you. There's a lot of conspiracy theories around. There's a lot of subjects coming up. There's a lot of people who are getting angry at the situation now, and you know, this is it. Where I've been able to draw from it, thanks to my traditional points of view, shall we like, and thanks to my teachings, or to the teachings which I've actually received. Whereas I've been able to do that, I have actually seen people go the opposite way and go totally within their anger, within their anxieties, within their many tortures which the outside world gives them and not themselves. So maybe they have kind of missed out on an opportunity. I'm not sure as to whether that's a fair assessment of things, simply because of the fact that, again, by believing that everybody is in exactly the same, or in the same exact place as they should be, in the exact moment that they should be, are they missing out on something? Or is it just my worry? Is it just me and my perspective that is saying, well, guess what? This is actually happening. This is dying out. And are we going the right way about things? Now, I've actually been very lucky for the same reasons as the people that I say have no connection to the traditional methods are doing. So you might be able to call me a hypocrite in a certain sense, in the sense that, I've never been locked inside the temple. I've never been for months on end in meditation. Is it right for me to talk about this? Well, I've had enough experiences shared with me to know that I have enough knowledge to at least talk about it. It is not a personal point of view, but given the wide range of perspectives that I've received from different people who have followed these traditions in a very orthodox way, I can only tell you that they are based in I would like to say truth because of how that's the word that actually comes to me, but they are based in fact, in reality, in practice. Okay, so what are we really looking at? What are we doing? Where exactly are we going with our spirituality? Especially, like I said, I feel like a hypocrite. Maybe, strictly speaking, I am being a hypocrite by complaining about other people not having gone in depth enough. The difference between myself and others is that I've actually tried to get as to go there, and if I haven't maybe been able to go there yet, it's probably because of the fact that I was destined to do this in another way. After all, it was by talking to a person who I consider a dear friend and a teacher that he quite rightly said, just because of the fact that I follow a tradition, a Buddhist tradition, and he himself is actually a main part of a particular lineage at the moment. Just because of the fact that I follow a particular tradition, there is nothing written that says that the next enlightened being is actually going to be part of a particular tradition, which is true, and it's kind of my point of view as well. There is nothing that says that a person can't come up with their own way of doing things, which is pretty much the way that I've gone about things. But this doesn't actually mean that I haven't spent months dedicating to one subject alone, to one mantra, to one particular discipline. All the disciplines which I use, all the disciplines which I practice, all the different disciplines which I put at other people's disposal have all been practiced in time and time and time again. As a matter of fact, there are at least 10,000 hours practice in each one of those. Anyway, we are... I know, it's probably a lot to take in and it's a lot to listen to. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a little bit of music and give you a chance to go off and maybe have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, nip to the loo, and have a little think about what I said. And as I do, I will leave you to listen to a wonderful little track which I've actually found online, which I find entirely inspiring to you. welcome back. Okay, so as we were saying, we were talking about spirituality and the essence or its role in today's society, shall we say. And as I was saying, it is my opinion, even though it might be slightly hypocritical of me to say so, that the traditional religions, or should we say the traditional disciplines, get your words out, Peter, are on the way out, as before, they're dying. And if you look at more and more traditions that are going by, sort of thing, then we need to kind of rethink as to how are we going to make these traditions survive. And the only way that we are going to make them survive is by really and truly reaching out for what is a true, pure tradition. So, whereas I was being, or maybe not, hypocritical earlier, I will say that it is my intention of actually someday traveling out towards Asia and experience some of these traditional events, some of these traditional temples, and to be able to share and hopefully partake in some of the teachings that they share with the outside. I would encourage anybody who has the same inkling to do the same thing. You see, what I was saying to you earlier is this: where I've actually been able to get something from what is happening now, as in for with the COVID disaster. It's where I've been able to go back into what my core is, and thankfully, and I don't know quite how to word what I want to say. What I wish to say is that I am very, very grateful for the teachings that I have received, which have been very orthodox. They are probably the ones which have brought me further along the way. And speaking of being further along the way, I'm not going to say that I am on my way to enlightenment, but I can say I'm working for it. I can say that I continue to work for it, and it is thanks to the traditional teachings which I've received that I'm able to do so. This is why I say it is important to maintain these traditions alive. But obviously, the tradition which I'm following at the moment is just one of them, and there are many, many, many different paths that actually lead to the same result. And in my knowledge, in the experience which I've made, in the amount of people which I've made which I've met in each tradition that I've looked into, I have always find that there are people of the same stature within it. And I have found what I would now call a bodhisattva in Wicca. I have found them in different traditions and even within religions themselves. But I haven't found them than the yoga gym. I haven't found them doing non-traditional yoga. I haven't found them doing non-traditional, um, what's the word I'm looking for, disciplines, if that is what they can be called. Now, one of the other problems that we face, especially out here in the West, is the fact that we come across a lot of different teachings, and because of the fact that we don't have the same background as what our friends from Asia do, we don't have the ability to, how can I put this, to ascertain as to whether the person in front of us is actually a true teacher or not. Okay? So what we find is that we find some very, sometimes unprepared people who are willing to transmit activations, abhisekas, different abilities, shall we say, or they're willing to open others up to abilities to which they themselves don't understand. And usually part of the reason why they don't understand them is because of the fact that they haven't actually done the famous 10,000 hours which I was talking to you about earlier. You will find that there are a lot of people, especially now, all of you know that, or most of you know that I'm actually a Reiki master. Even within Reiki, and especially within Reiki, this is quite obvious. Now, there are, in my experience, different levels of understanding. There is different levels of being, and each one of us will evolve through different disciplines in different ways, and I am totally in accordance with that. However, I do believe that when you look into a subject, then you should look into it fully, giving it your full and undivided attention. Now, my teachers, or my Reiki masters, which I actually had two of them, actually were quite surprised, amused by the effort which I actually put into that discipline in the 9 months that it took me to go from first level to Reiki Master. Now, 9 months, to be perfectly honest, it's a very, very short time, and I was probably able to do so simply because of the fact that, like I said to you at the beginning of this conversation, of this podcast, I have my own abilities to be thankful for, and those helped me tremendously to incorporate and to understand exactly what was happening with the different energies. It is very, very easy to ascertain how something is working when you can actually see it working, in compared to somebody who is just trying to visualize or understand by feeling how something is actually working, especially when you have maybe put so many hours into the subject in itself, whilst others have not. And I think that the practice actually shows just how much that system is a part of you or not. I have met, especially online, and this is part of what I was actually trying to get to, I have met many, many, many people who have been attuned as Reiki Masters. If I was to count how many real Reiki Masters I've actually met, do you know what? I've never actually counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. 7 out of probably more than 100. 100 which I don't know of. I've actually made within Reiki. I've actually tuned 22 people to the title, to the degree of Reiki Master. So that's not including them sort of thing, but 7. That's not a lot, is it? Not a lot when you count how many Reiki Masters there are out there. And what makes these people different? What makes these people special? It's the energy that goes with it. They are when you work with invisible energies, if you like, when you work with universal energies, when you work with energies which are around us, which we aren't always able to channel, the one thing that actually happens to you is that your vibration, as you increase the dosage, shall we say, actually goes higher. And when this happens, if your knowledge and your practice and your energy all go hand in hand, what you will find is that as the person grows themselves, this person's vibration, it's kind of a permanent fixture there, even though they may not be in that particular moment be practicing. Okay, this is what you might consider a personal achievement for that person within that kind of vibration, which obviously means that that vibration is actually so strong in them, and they have practiced it so much that it is permanently present in them. Now, of those 7 people, the reason that they got there, the way that they've got there, is by further studying than most do, is by practice upon practice upon practice upon practice, hours and hours and hours of practice. Practice in what, you might say? Practice in what is their search. Practice in what is their quest, whatever that quest on a personal basis might be. And it is actually different for each one of those people. Now, if you look at the difference between this and the many people that I've actually met and have claimed or who are Reiki Masters, this is kind of like the difference that there is. One of the things that I found through the practice of meditations, for example, is the fact that I have found a calm, a tranquility which cannot be touched, basically. No matter what the outside does, what anybody on the outside might do to me, that tranquility cannot be touched. It's untouchable, it's unbreakable. And that is due to my own vibration, if you like. Or, sorry, that achievement is part of my own vibration. This is exactly the same way as what these other people have achieved theirs, is by practice, is by continuing to do what it is and they do to the best of their abilities, each day trying to give a little bit more, each day trying to understand for themselves and for the sake of others. Yeah, and that is what a traditional Buddhist monk would receive. It's not just a practice, it's the teaching in themselves which are really, really, really important. Now, we spoke about conspiracy theories earlier. So, and by the way, I will be touching that subject in one of my future episodes, if not probably in even more. And before I do, I will give you exactly what my point of view is on the matter. Let us just say for now that I am totally neutral to it, in the sense that it doesn't actually affect me in one way or another, and I will explain why on another occasion. We are now talking about spirituality and its role in modern society, and how can I put it? It's not part of what I wish to discuss now. But as we've mentioned that beforehand, we should also mention the fact that as there are conspiracies, there are actually conspirators as well. Okay, so if this is the case and it's happening, as a fatalist, I kind of have to say, well, even if we are living under a conspiracy, guess what? It was kind of meant to be. But what I would like to achieve, and this is where maybe I might differ from many, is what is the use of my knowing this, and not to what advantage I can put it to, simply because of the fact that, like I said to you earlier, and I've actually written this in various posts on Facebook as well, conspiracy theories, as far as I'm concerned, the spreading of them doesn't actually help the current situation, not in one bit. All of what it's doing, it's putting petrol on a very, very vivid fire, guys. So be responsible with what you say, okay? That's all I'm going to say about it. When we approach the subject on the podcast or on the radio show, then I will speak what I believe in as far as the matter is concerned. But going back to what I was saying is this. In this modern day where finding somebody who has truly met their calling is so rare, where finding a teacher who is truly a teacher is rare, how can a lot of people not be dubious as to whether we are actually on the right path or not? Simply because of the fact that on the one side I actually kind of understand it. There's a lot of people out there who make some very, very, very big claims. Very big claims which unfortunately they can't keep to. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I see these people is, it is not my concern. It is certainly not my karma which is involved in this. But please be careful as to what information you divulge. And if you do divulge information, please make sure that that information is fully researched. Anything less than that makes you, how can I put it? I hate to use the term, but it's probably the best term to describe what the outcome is, and that is then it makes you a wannabe. You will want to be something, but you are not. Now, this is one of my favourite quotes, if you like, in the sense that many years ago, whilst I was reading, I have a lot of different interests. I'm not just a spiritual person. I have many, many interests, one of which is actually reading, and I happen to be rereading Shakespeare, and in particular I was reading Othello, which I found to be quite intriguing, simply because of the fact that I found Shakespeare to cover a lot of different subjects or different aspects of humanity, if you like. And yes, he does treat different things in Othello than he has done from in others where he treats love, but there are particular things about Othello, and especially Act 3, Scene 1. Yeah? The one that everybody knows about Othello. To be or not to be. Well, this is it, guys, To be or not to be, it's pretty much what it's all about. I mean, it's all very well us saying that we are something, us thinking that we might be something, but at the end of the day, if you are not, and if it can't be felt that you are who you say you are, then you're not, are you? Not really. So, next time you say I am or I have, think of it. To be or not to be. I can say I'm Wicca, but, and to this day, to those of you who know me, I still maintain, officially speaking, a high priest title. But I can't really say that I'm Wicca because of the fact that it is a tradition which I no longer practice. Does this mean that I disrespect it, that I've gone over it, that I think it's less than it's inferior? No, absolutely not. Don't misunderstand me. The reason why I have left traditions behind is not because of the fact that they're not valid. I have left them behind because of the fact that they are not for me. Okay? There is a difference here. And those traditions which do have a value, they will be spoken about on this program. I want to introduce some of the subject onto the radio as well, and I think that there should be. But I don't believe that we should be talking about just one particular subject. I welcome all religious views, but at the same time I wish to not be associated with or to be biased in my view in every religion out there. And I've studied enough of them to have a good understanding about the various religions. And my understanding so far has been that they have a role for now. But just like the traditions which I'm talking about, so the more traditional, the more ancient traditions are being lost. If you're not careful, so will those traditions be lost. And if they are lost, they will not be lost because of those who are true to their word, who are true to their faith, to themselves. But they will be lost because of those people who are not. And like you can find the fake masters, the fake teachers, the fake gurus, the fake this, that and the other, you will find the fake religious person within a religious ambient as well, so within a church as well. To be or not to be. Now, if you really think of it, it is a great question. And I guess that the only way that you can actually answer that is by knowing yourself. And to know yourself is what the tradition brings you to. There are methods which have been time-tried, tested, which work, and have done, some for hundreds of years, some for thousands of years, some for even longer than that. So, what is our next step? If we find ourselves in evolution, if we find ourselves in a shifting energy, which is this moment, what can we do? We could ask why, by the way. Yes. Why is this happening? Right now, I don't really think that it's the right question to ask, simply because, in my experience, if you answer one why, you come up with 10 more. And if you answer those 10 more, you will come up with 10 more for each one of those, which will give you another 100. I am not here to answer why. If I was enlightened, if I had a total reconnection with the whole universe, I might be able to answer that, but I'm not. I am somebody who has come a long way, yes. Somebody who might be on the way, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that I am not somebody who can answer those whys. What I can answer is what we can do right now. Excuse me. So what can we do right now? Well, like I said, we can research these different traditions, we can make sure that they don't die out. We can pursue and we can ensure when these traditions don't. Will it be possible to save all of them? Possibly not. Will that make a difference? Possibly. But, never the same, if we can probably try and be all of what we can, if we try and be better than what we were yesterday, each day, if we try and remain centered by taking the right decisions for right now in our long path, in our long term, then maybe we can save enough in order for some of that help which we have received up until now, for it not to die down. Now, the other question that has also come to my mind is this. If everything fails, if technology breaks down, all the knowledge that you have in books, in digital books, digital recordings, digital videos, which you said, yeah, okay, I'll put that in my favourites and I'll definitely watch that later. And a day has gone by, a week, a month, a year. Have a good look. How many years? Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of why I've actually wanted to get back into the radio. The funny thing is about being here tonight is that even though, yes, to begin with, I was very, very nervous, I must admit. Also because of the fact that, I have untested equipment, and thankfully I've received enough feedback from people who are listening to know that it's actually working and it is broadcasting. How can I say this? I actually feel extremely comfortable right now. I feel as if I'm talking to a friend. And if I'm talking to a friend, I want to give you time to listen to you, and I also want to give time to be with you. Now, I've spoken about a lot of different things tonight, and by the way, for those of you who are listening, if you are on the Spreaker website, or if you are listening to us through Spreaker, there is actually a live chat on there. I don't know if you've actually seen it, but yeah, there should be a comment from me coming. Okay, so yeah, like I was saying, there is an actual chat on the Spreaker website. So if you have questions and you want answering, by all means, please do put them there. Okay. Okay, so as I was saying, if we are to continue to go forward, what can we do? Where can we look for these teachings, and how can we try and preserve them? Well, obviously, at least for some of us, me included maybe, we would love the chance to go and lock ourselves away for months or maybe even years on end and be able to study some of these traditions. Reality is that unfortunately we can't, which is kind of what we were saying in the first place, sort of thing. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to practice what we do have, and it doesn't mean that we can't continue to grow on what we have. So what can we do? Well, we can seek out some of those teachings, and certainly part of the mission of this station, beg your pardon, of this broadcast is actually going to be that of finding those teachings with you and for you as well, to share them and to discuss them most of all with you. Okay, so if you wish to ask questions, or if you wish to leave a comment or whatever it might be, like I said, you can do it obviously on the post from the social media, which I will look at after the broadcast. But during the broadcast itself, the only chat which I will be looking at will always be the chat inside Spreaker. Okay, if you are listening to the podcast after that, or after the live event, and you wish to leave a message on the actual or a comment on the chat for that particular episode, then you are more than welcome to. I will obviously try and get back to you. If I haven't, however, got back to you, by all means give me a nudge. Please remember, like I said, there's a lot of organising that goes behind running a podcast or a station and running your own life, sort of thing. And it takes quite a bit of involvement, especially when you're first learning. And obviously, I'm only just learning now for myself in reality, so I'm only just putting myself to the test now. If I do make some mistakes, and I will undoubtedly make quite a few, I will probably make them in the first episodes, and it's not up until I've had a chance to be able to re-listen to the different lives, then I will be able to suss out what the problem was and go and fix it. Okay, so yeah, basically going back to what I was saying is this. What can we do? We can make sure that we try and find out everything that we can from the different traditions. And the only way that we do this is by asking questions. Personally speaking, like I said, I have kind of left the why questions to a later stage. simply because of the fact that I find that asking why interferes with the learning of knowledge. It interferes because of the fact that it wants to it kind of brings into the matter not so much the learning but the inquisitive mind and the egoistic mind. So it kind of pleases the ego, if you like, but it doesn't please your growth. And whilst by doing everything that you can, by being coherent, by being of one mind, one thought, one word, one action, then you can actually make a change. You see, what makes those 7 people true Reiki masters is exactly that. They have one thought, and that is the practice, their discipline. They have one word, and the word is the teaching that they follow. They have but one action, which is to repeat and to do, to be everything that they say that they are. Now, if you want to know the difference between the traditional monk and the practitioners, if you like, that we find over into the West, it's quite easy, and I have seen this time and time again. It's all very well to be out on social media, public events, so on and so forth, and be all full of peace and love and tranquility and prosperity and all the rest of it. Of course it is. That is the way that, you are kind of expected to be, in a way. So that is exactly the image which is portrayed to people. Then things change. People go behind closed doors and things change, because that peace and love, when a piece of Lego gets stuck underneath your foot because a child has left it there or a partner forgot to pick it up, kind of goes out the way, doesn't it? When you start swearing, when you start cursing, when you start giving blame for having left things out. Especially when this is done in a very unpolite manner. So you see, again, it's to be which is important, because a true teacher is calm, is conscious, is present. A true operator, I mean as in for a holistic operator, yes, they are people. Yes, they make mistakes. Yes, some of them smoke, some of them drink. So do I. So do my teachers. So have enlightened masters. I've seen them do it. So, yes, you're right, I'm not them. And that doesn't excuse me doing it. But then again, it actually tells me that if done consciously, it can be done consciously. So, but if, however, we are not so conscious, if, however, we are not who we think we are, if we are not who we say we are, but we are simply a piece of paper, a diploma written somewhere on a wall, like the many that I have in front of me right now. If I look at each one of those diplomas, I know how many hours I have put into each one of those, and I can say maybe I should take a couple of them down, simply because if I stop practicing, I should take a few of them down, maybe because of the fact that there are things that I no longer follow, but they are a part of me, even though it is a past part of me. They are a part of the person who has come to where I am now. And actually thinking about it, in all reality, they are so much a part of me, and that knowledge is so instilled within me, that quite often I do actually find myself thinking, actually, if you think of it in that way, through that particular discipline, this is quite easily explained. So, you see, maybe this is the difference between being and not being, and following a tradition and not following a tradition. And if we are following a tradition, are we following it to its full extent, or are we just following it to what is our need right now? Are we looking into things as well, as deeply as we can? Personally, I don't believe that we are. And by saying this, I realise that maybe I am just as guilty as other people are doing this. The COVID has certainly given me a possibility to do many different things, and one of those things has been to heal myself from within. And by healing myself, I've come out with the radio station, something which I had not forgotten about, because I found it was something that had always left me wanting for more, in a way. I always knew that this is something I wanted to do, something I wanted to be able to do, at least anyway. It has brought to the website, it has brought to a much more professional approach to things. So I will be distinguishing between people who ask me questions for the radio, and people who ask me specific questions as far as the different consultations which I make. I will be making distinction, but not, what's the word I'm looking for? But not separation. That's it. Or should I say that is actually the inverse. I will be making separation, but not distinction, in the sense that people who come to me for consultations do so out of a necessity, whatever that necessity might be, as to whether that might be to get over a particular thing, as to whether that might be to know particular things, or as to whether that might be to heal from certain things. Whichever might be that reason, they are still coming to me directly, and they are asking for my energy directly. Okay? So you are asking me to perform a role in the same way as what you would do a monk, and I see that as an energy exchange, and as an energy exchange I expect energy in return. That energy will be under the form of a payment. So if you ask me for a consultation, yes, you will be charged. If you ask me for some advice to do with your learning, to do with your path, to do with any particular show or any particular phrase which I might use, or tradition which I might mention during a broadcast, then obviously, because of the fact that this is a non-separate issue, if you like, if you pardon the use of the word. As if, it's a separate issue, yes, but it's something which I'm doing voluntarily. I'm doing this in order to create if we like, a positive karma, not just for myself, but also for those people who are true to themselves and who truly are. So, if they can be who they say they are, then they can be here. Okay? To go back to our William Shakespeare anecdote. So you see, if you look at everything that we've looked at tonight, and we look at the difference between the possibilities given to particular traditions, traditions which unfortunately are actually dying out, and how much we still need to learn from those traditions in order to make them our own, then we have a lot of work to do. What can you do? Do whatever you can. However little, however big, do it. If you are learning from it, nobody else will know until you are ready to share it. And when you will share it in a manner which is right, which is true to yourself and to all. And that is all any of us can ask of you. As for the rest of the discussion as to where spirituality is within society at the moment, I think that the word I would use, it's open itself but confused. Confused maybe because of the fact that they've missed out on a bit. And that bit does actually come from those traditional teachings. So the reason why I ask to preserve all teachings belonging to all tribes, and if you are part of a small community, it doesn't matter as to whether this is in the highest mountains of Tibet, or in a small village in Africa, or in whatever. I'm not making particular distinctions. You could be in a small village here in Suffolk, where I am. If you have a tradition, a value which is worth keeping, and if it has survived for this long, there probably is a good reason for it, and that reason is for you to learn it, or to be able to learn it, by all means do. If you don't, let us know. And we'll try and bring you on here and try and share those experiences with somebody else. Now, unfortunately, I can't think of any of my friends from Sardinia who actually speak English. Having said that, I will put a post out later, and if I do find one of them who does, then I would love to bring him on the show and actually let you see exactly the kind of people that these are, and they have a brilliant tradition behind them, and the reason why they have that tradition is because they have kept to a very, very high, I would almost call it moral standard, as in, for although not every tradition can be right, there is usually a reason for it, and if you understand that reason for it, then you can learn from it and be able to transmit that to other people as well. Now, obviously, Sardinia is just one place. There are many, many, many beautiful places and beautiful people that I would love to share with you from my own experiences. I'm not sure as to whether I will be able to share some of those people, simply because of the fact that some of them are no longer with us, and some of them are actually very, very private people, and by being very private people, they do not wish to be disturbed while they do their practice. Having said that, there are people out there who do teach, and it is my intention of both finding them and of bringing them on the show in order for you to be able to partake in what is their knowledge, in their experience, and what their particular tradition could actually give to you. Now, like I said to you earlier, if this is the case and I do bring people onto the radio, please remember that I'm doing so on a instructional basis only, as in for I'm bringing them here to let you get a feel of it. Following any particular tradition, following any particular teaching will be entirely your choice. As I take responsibility for everything which is said on this radio show, on this podcast, as I take also possession of everything that is said and thought of for this show, for this station, for this podcast. So all physical and what's the word I'm looking for? No, I can't think of it right now. Okay. So as I take full responsibility for this radio, for the broadcast which will be made through it, I also bring you to your responsibility, and your responsibility is to think, is to reason, and one of the thoughts that I would like you to undertake, one of the reasons I would like to give you, it's simply this. If you are listening to this show, there is a reason. I can't tell you what that reason is. I might be able to with some of you. And if you ask me to, I would probably certainly be able to tell you yes. But offhand, without even knowing who's listening or who might be listening in the future, I wouldn't even attempt it. It would be presumptuous on my behalf. And I'm no longer a presumptuous person. I am presumptuous in the sense that I would expect you to be all of what you can be. I am presumptuous in thinking that you should be all that you can be. I am presumptuous in simply saying you are responsible for your own actions. You are responsible for your own happiness. Your happiness, your actions depend not just upon you, but upon others as well. And just like you depend upon others, others depend upon you. Remember this. Think of it. Meditate on it. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a great pleasure to speak to you. I hope that you will follow. I hope you will share. I hope you will like. I hope you will hit the subscription buttons. You know where to go. If you're looking for the contacts, you can either look for Radio Little Lotus or for Peter Dharma Walker on any of the social medias. That's including Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and obviously all the different podcasts. The different podcasts can actually be found not only on Spreaker, but they have been submitted to Spotify and also to iTunes, as well as to all the main broadcast RSS broadcasters, which are basically how you listen to a podcast. So with this, I will leave you to it. I thank you once again, and I will leave you with this beautiful piece.